Hello and welcome back to Aetheral Space 8.19. We are back. Hello.
To live is to eat and be eaten. He didn't say the subtitle again, but I got you.
Sorry.
It's okay. Did you guys know, here's my fun fact, Dragon was in the gifted program growing up, or he would have been if he didn't live in an awful home.
You made that up. I never said that. Well, actually, that's...
We were just... This is exactly what you just said 5 seconds ago.
Really?
Well, actually, no, you said Eustace was in. Sorry,
Yeah,
I got
Eustace.
confused. There was a kid named Eustace who could telekinetically move things with his mind. But yes, we're back, and we're just going to jump straight into reading because we have a lot to read.
To do.
Yeah, so you get less banter today. I'm just going to
So get
go.
comfy.
Everything was inherited. John Blair watched from a dusty corner as his regal father sat in an old armchair, watching the last of the servants leave through the massive windows. The perpetual rain of Riadine pelted against the windows. The leaving crowd was accompanied by a swarm of floating automatic umbrellas. Oh, that's nice. His father lifted his glass of whiskey to his lips and took a decisive swig. "What makes a king, he muttered to himself. Not this. John fell back through the wall and the air beyond the wall, sucked back into the maelstrom of his life. Everything was tinted red, painted red, blessed red. Even his thoughts had taken on a spectral crimson hue. The events of his life were like shattered glass around him, all occurring at once. And in these moments, where he was outside of the chaos, it was like looking at a kaleidoscope all of himself. He lifted his arm slightly, and as if in response, there was a great cacophony of his own voice. All the words he'd ever said, all the lies he'd ever told, even to himself. He was on a sand-swept plain, aiming a sniper rifle. He was in a rotting alleyway, slamming his fists into the jaw of an easy target. He was walking through the cell blocks of a prison, selecting the men and women who would be his new partners. Then he was in the nightmare again. He was in one of the caverns off White Village, dragging the body of the Coalition agitator behind him with one hand. He'd thought it a convenient place to dump the body. The others had come with him to watch his back and make sure there were no witnesses. But the thing that had witnessed them had been so far above them that it wasn't even funny. It had slithered out from a deeper cave, like a great nailless finger, and it had taken them, hooked itself around them, and dragged them down to the depths, and opened them, and remade them. It was remaking him now. He was dimly aware of that, but it no longer mattered. All the things he was losing, he didn't need anyway. "Look at you, dead man," the red god said, swinging his brain stem like a pendulum. "You are almost ready. You are almost ready to become." "Become what?" he murmured. The answer came again in the form of the maelstrom. He was submerged again, drowning in old sights and sounds and smells, marinated by them and by the ever-present crimson. The universe was being injected right into his eyeballs. It felt as if his skull would burst. Everything was inherited. "What makes a king, his father muttered, staring out the window. By doing so, by saying those words, he passed on his resentment. That resentment had been born from the pride given to his father by his forebears, and so on and so on. What makes a king, 1,000 John Blairs echoed. Yes, echoed. That was all there was. That was all life was. The mindless aping of ideals that had existed before. Had John ever had an original thought in his life? Had anyone? And now he was inheriting the will of a red god. It was nothing new, nothing to be afraid of at all. Any fear he could possess was hollow imitation of terror past. If only you'd never existed. John turned to see the source of the sound. Some distance away, beyond the kaleidoscope, a mother was strangling her pale-haired son. "I know him," John muttered, and his memories gleamed in response. He'd seen this young man in the caverns, hadn't he? All grown up. Had he said his name back then? He couldn't recall, but Ian had definitely mentioned it. He'd taken an interest, after all. Dragon Hadrian. The image flickered, and when it cleared, the red god was now the one strangling the boy. Her white hair, starker than his silver, hung over her face and concealed any emotion, but the cold fury in her voice was unmistakable. "If only you'd never existed!" she echoed. "If only you'd never existed!" She squeezed just a bit tighter, and there was the hollow snap of a broken neck. The boy's thrashing ceased, and the form of the red god drifted away like smoke. "This is what you want of me?" John asked Infinity. "You want me to kill him?" All the world was affirmation. Some trace of ambition still remained, and it trickled from John's lips. And then, "What happens? What do I get?" The world to come flashed before his eyes, the panacea unburdening itself from the planet, sending its agents out, reuniting with its severed selves. A great crusade of burning and vengeance and death all across the galaxy, a war that could not be won. But there, in the middle of the burning, a throne had been set aside for him, like a toy to placate a child. "Will you become?" the red god asked. "Yes," John answered. For him, the word no longer existed. "Yes, I will become." "You know, sir," the young security officer said, turning his head to look at Musashi, You don't have to stay up here with me. I'm quite capable, I mean it." A calm, warm wind. Should there be a comma after comma? When there's two adjectives, isn't there a comma?
Yeah.
A calm, warm wind brushed over their hair as they stood atop the Exocorp building. Guess you'll have to fix the version on Royal Road. This is what you get when I don't read it first.
The waitress goes to scream, but I decapitate her with a wave of my hand.
He stood atop the Exocorp building, the desert stretching out in every direction. The silence of the space was calm and soothing, like a blanket settling over them. It was hard to believe, just from this view, the horrors that had occurred over the last few days. "It's no issue," Musashi said, hawkish eyes scanning the horizon. "I know that sentry duty is lonesome work. The value of company can't be overstated." The officer nodded, a shy smile on his face. "Okay, thanks, I guess." The plasma rifle felt heavy and unwieldy in Musashi's hands as he paced back and forth across the roof. But he couldn't exactly snipe with luminescence. I mean, can't he? Isn't this whole thing thrusters? Musashi?
Yeah, but not that far.
Maybe he just hasn't tried hard enough, shaking my head. You know what he should do? You know, like the rope dart?
Yeah.
He should die like a cord around luminescence so he can, like, thruster rope dart it around. And then he can snipe with a sword. Problem solved. The new head of security, a steadfast man named Grayson. Grayson? Wait, he's here too? Wait, is this intentional?
What do you mean?
Did you not forget that you made the police chief in Havoc Moon Grayson?
Well, Xanderklaus, his name was.
I thought it was Grayson. Grayson Xanderklaus.
Oh, well, he's a different guy.
It's the same one. I have to. What was his voice again? Fuck, I forgot.
He doesn't appear.
Let him go.
Oh, yeah.
I looked back through the security records and confirmed the death of the dead-hand sniper. As such, he declared it safe for sentries to go onto the roof to keep watch. Oh, I don't have to voice him, it's fine. With the unusual way Marie had been acting lately, Musashi had been glad to have something to do. As a special officer, he was very much used to slotting into existing chains of command anyway. "It's taken a while for help to get here, huh?" the officer said, watching the area through his scope. Kinda worrying? Just personally, I mean." Musashi straightened up. "I'm certain help is on the way," he reassured his fellow. "But this is an unusual situation. No doubt they're making sure they understand it before they act." He couldn't say for sure whether that was a lie, but it sat ill on his tongue all the same. There was no way the planet Panacea could have been silent for this long without somebody investigating. The Supremacy, Exocorp, or even the UAP should have sent a force to investigate by now. And yet, nothing. Just the stillness of the sky. "Looks clear to me," the officer muttered, slinging his rifle over his shoulder. He glanced at Musashi. "Heading back in?" Sorry, were you saying something? Hello, Tien? Tianzazi? Alright, I'm just going to keep reading. I assume he had the BRB for a second. Musashi clasped his hands behind his back, staring off at the rising light. "In a moment, this place is calming." "Well, be careful," the officer replied, already on his way back inside. "You don't know what those repurposed are capable of, man." There was the sound of a door closing, and then the blessed silence of the dunes returned. Musashi took a deep breath in through his nose and out through his mouth. How could so much violence occur among such tranquility? He truly couldn't understand it. In the distance, you could see the pale haze of White Village, surrounded by the black monoliths of the mining automatics. Smoke still drifted up from them, signs of the sabotage that had preceded the initial outbreak. Would people ever live there again? It was a strange, sad feeling to look upon a place that had once been filled with life and know that it would now be forevermore empty. There had been families there once, children. Now there were only cold rooms, meals left half-eaten, and an altogether different kind of silence. No, that wasn't quite right. Those families weren't gone at all, were they? They were only changed. The wind blew again, and this time it was as cold as winter. Muzazi shuddered as a chill rippled throughout his body. The desert was still as ever, and so Muzazi slung his rifle over his back as well. It felt clumsy there, like a shirt too big. It really didn't suit him at all. There was a strange atmosphere to this place, like the world was on the very verge of changing, and this was the last place to fall into the pit. Like this tranquility would shatter into chaos at any moment. Chaos! A heavy sigh escaped his lips. A heavy hand landed on his shoulder, and Muzazi was pulled backwards by inhuman strength. Sudden adrenaline coursing through him, Muzazi widened his eyes and reached for luminescence. But then he recognized the person in the corner of his eye. Then he hesitated for but a moment, just long enough for another hand to cover his mouth. "A toy?" Marie Hazzy snarled. "No! Tan, where are you? Oh, no, he's muted. Oh, no. Oh, we have too much to read today. Oh, no. I have to keep going. No! Marie, no! You were supposed to not choose evil." This is fucked up. I hope this is like some sort of fake out down the line, but right now I'm in pain. I'm in so much pain, Zanzin. It cannot happen. Please. Peon stretched as much as he was able. I have to get past it. Peon stretched as much as he was able on the uneven floor of the cave, carefully aimed his pistol, and blasted one of his feet off. The pain didn't even register anymore. As Peon watched his left foot crumble and melt under the tender mercies of the plasma shot, he felt nothing but a slightly irritating tingle. Is it Peon or Pion? I'm going to keep going with Peon for now, until you can speak again. More like someone was tickling him than anything else. Not that anyone had ever tickled him, but he was fantasized. Well, Peon. It had been days since he'd seen any of the others, or since he'd heard them in his head, for that matter. He didn't especially miss the psychopaths, but things got lonely. He'd already taken apart and reassembled the equipment he had left 7 times. Even without expert opinion, he had no doubt those scripts had never run better. Still, it wasn't all bad. The other presence in his head was gone too, that red rippling that his thoughts occasionally brushed against. It was a strange sensation to be rid of that. It was like breathing fresh air again after days of nothing but smog. Everything was so much clearer, even the boredom. Especially the boredom. It's Peon, right?
Yeah.
But why does Peon no longer have the red in him?
Who knows? Oh, I'm so fucking sorry. It's
Peon. Peon watched as his foot slowly grew back, the only sign of interest being the slow raising of his eyebrow over his circular glasses. Even the novelty of that miracle had long since run its course. He still vaguely wondered where the Panacea got the extra matter from, though. Under normal circumstances, it was generally believed that the inert Panacea drained small amounts of resources from the host body when growing new flesh, but the near-endless regeneration of the repurposed was clearly beyond the pale. If he was an actual scientist, he'd have been inclined to investigate further, but no, he considered himself a tinkerer. Adept enough to put together bombs and guns, but he'd never really had any interest in anything beyond that. He'd only gone with the dead hand for the money anyway. All he had to do was repair and maintain the equipment these idiots damaged, and he got a good wage. And if he had to kick the ribs of some agitator or protester now and again, well, the work was the work. Peon was just about to test how long it took for his ear to grow back when he heard the crunch of foot against sand, and he jolted up from his reverie. A shadow fell from the entrance of the cave. There, silhouetted against the rising sun, was a human figure with long, flowing hair. "Boss!" Peon quickly rose to his feet, straightening his glasses, only to glance downwards with a quizzical jump of his eyebrow. Boss," he muttered, "you do realize you're buck naked, right?" John Blair nodded vaguely in response, before continuing to stagger into the cavern, holding on to the wall for support. That same serene smile was on his lips, but there was a strange desperation in his eyes, like he was coming down off some high. Yes, he murmured, inspecting the sand on his fingertips, as if it were the most interesting thing in the world. "I want to. It's right, I think, that I thank you for your hard work, Peon. It's You've always been very capable. Yes, very capable indeed. Thanks, boss. Something wasn't right. John Blair had hardly even looked at him after his recruitment, and he certainly wasn't the type to hand out compliments like this. As Peon awkwardly stepped to the side to allow Blair passage, he suddenly got ready to raise his pistol. If it came down to it, he wasn't taking any chances. Imagine being such a shitty person that receiving one compliment from you procs someone else to fucking put up their gun. Just like, what the fuck?
Right.
This is like, you know how, like, anytime you try to compliment, like, an artist or a writer, they, like, lose their shit, and they're like, no, it's terrible. This is like that cranked up to 11. It wasn't like shooting Blair would kill him, but it would certainly give Peon time to make a run for it. Blair stumbled past him, his bare back slick with sweat. His bare back slick with sweat. He stopped right next to Peon, staring off into space. Yes, very good, he went on, blinking rapidly. That's why. It's so very unfortunate. Well, Peon had heard enough. He raised his pistol, slammed it right against Blair's temple, and fired. He didn't so much as flinch. Huh? Peon whispered. As Peon watched, frozen with horror, Blair reached out and grasped him by the arm holding the gun, squeezing with such strength that the bone was instantly broken. The pistol slipped from his fingers, and as Peon looked up at his employer, he saw it. He saw the cloaked Aether construct, like a two-tier ring, floating in the air around John Blair. He saw the slightest grin on Blair's slack face. He saw Blair's mouth snap open so wide that the skin of his cheeks tore apart. And finally, he saw Blair lunge forward and begin to eat. As the sun rose, the nameless cavern in the nameless desert was filled with the sounds of screaming, thrashing, and tearing flesh. John Blair was a messy eater, after all. By dusk, those sounds had been replaced by a uniform slurping, by slurry being absorbed through skin and tongue. And by night, it had been replaced by the howls of something not human. It was almost time, almost ready. Ranavalona straightened his tie as he strode through the hallway of the Exocorp building, nodding to a passing security personnel. He was just in the process of returning from his 24-hourly rest. As a gene noble, there was little need for him to sleep, but he had to keep up appearances for the personnel. If the boss never slept, word quickly got out. 1,000 years of hiding told you these things. But not for long. No, not for long at all. By his estimates, it was only a matter of weeks until the Enfant were ready to survive outside their vats. Once they could survive, they could reproduce. And once they could reproduce, they could swarm. Then, everything would be as it once was again. Once they'd established a sizable territory, Ranavalona would begin the process of mitosis, splitting himself again and again so as to replenish the gene noble population. I thought they, reset themselves.
They can do that as well. There's two ways, they can reproduce by mitosis, but that was, illegal because they didn't want too many. So that was what they did instead.
I see. Once that was accomplished... And is each one in mitosis a copy, or is it a new clone?
Usually it's a
when
copy.
You reset? Okay. Oh no. Oh no. Once that was accomplished, securing the rest of the galaxy would be a simple matter. He stopped outside the door to his lab, waiting as the initial scan confirmed his identity. He adjusted his DNA to perfectly match the system's records, and, like magic, the door opened before him. This whole thing had become a comfortable routine. Ranavalona stepped into the airlock, raised his arms up, and allowed the myriad of other scans to confirm his identity. Lights and rays washed over him for the briefest of moments, before being replaced with the cool green of affirmation. The next door opened, and Ranavalona stepped into his lab proper. Immediately he sighed in relief, allowing his body to assume a more comfortable quadrupedal form, cool slime pouring from vents on his skin to alleviate the morning heat. Cleaning automatics followed after him, dutifully scrubbing away the trail he left. How fucked would it be if Ranavalona was the one that skirrented Ansem Del Day away, huh? Is that the word for it, skirrented?
Yeah.
Well, wait. How do skirrents still exist in the modern era if gene tyrants have been dead for 1,000 years? Okay, so... Oh, God. The turtle guy reproduced his ancestors?
They're into it.
And continued to do so?
Yeah.
Hey, guys, if you ever think there's no one out there for you, just remember someone fucked Ansem Del Day away. Never lose hope. Heya, said Marie. She was sat in a chair by one of the opaque vats, chewing on some kind of sandwich. If Renavalona's current form had eyebrows, he would have raised one of them. As one he'd chosen as his apprentice, he'd given young Marie access to his lab. But it was still unusual to see her here without him. Even after 1,000 years, those genes carried on?
Yeah.
That's crazy. If anything, though, it was a good sign. It suggested an interest in the genetic arts that could be nurtured and grown. What was his voice? Good to see you wake and well, Renovalona said, giving himself just a touch more bipedality as he rose to his feet. 2 arms became 4, and 2 eyes became 8, holographic monitors rising to fill the available space. Today was an important day, the weekly check on the Unfont's comparative growth. So far, he hadn't been given cause for concern, but one could never be too careful when it came to their children. Renovalona triggered the switch to reveal the vats. This work was unprecedented, so even the slightest abnormality must be... Renovalona blinked with all the eyes he had. Must be. The vats had become transparent again, and they were empty. They were empty, save for the red fluid that sloshed around inside them, save for the tiniest pieces of gristle that floated inside them. They were looking at Liquid Corpse. What? He... I have to give it to you, Marie said from her seat, staring morosely down at the floor. You were careful. Not in the ways that mattered, but careful. You had those vats ready for anything. Ready to freeze, ready to nourish. Well, ready to kill them if it came down to it. You made it easy for me. Her words barely registered. Renovalona staggered towards the nearest vat, slapping his hands against it as if his will would bring back the life that had once occupied it. More and more arms sprouted, each planting themselves against the glass, each shaking like a tree in the middle of a thunderstorm. He clawed with 1,000 fingers, he wept with 1,000 eyes, he screamed with 1,000 mouths. And then, when he turned to look at Marie Hazard, he raged with the fury of 1,000 suns. Is 1,000 an important number because, 1,000 years revolution?
It wasn't intentional, but there we go.
It was 1,000 years ago. This guy loves 1,000. He wins 1,000 contests, and all of a sudden, the theme of
my life revolves around it now.
I was going to ask earlier, but I didn't want to interrupt because we were trying to go fast. Is there going to be a theme of nature versus nurture with all this inherited shenanigans and all this gene stuff? Very curious. All right, give us our fun fact, and then we can move
forward. The fun fact. Ansem Del Deaway's Gene Tyrant creator ancestor was obsessed with turtles, according to his enemies. They said he was crazy and he dreamed about turtles, but it's likely this was propaganda and he wasn't nearly that obsessed with turtles in reality.
So not all the Gene Tyrants got along with each other. They
no, it was
kind of
like
feudal lords.
Shit.
Oh! And that's why they all have queen names. It all comes together. Could you imagine being in the court of the Gene Tyrant King?
Yeah.
Would you be in a Gene Tyrant's court? I think I would be to save my own skin. Would the court be made up of other Gene Tyrants, or would it be of, their loyal creations?
Both.
What'd you say?
Both.
You cut out. Hello? Oh, he's muting. This guy's a muter boy. Alright, well, guys, I guess you'll have to find the answer to the titular... It's not titular.
You're going to look bad in the recording because it kept recording me. So I'm just going to go
both. I see. Alright, well, thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye!
Bye!